Okay, first thing, we have a little exercise together. How many people, if you understand every word I'm saying, hands way up. If you understand half, if you understand nothing, you... Okay. Okay. I want to say you are the heroes because we drove here yesterday in traffic. Oh. Okay? We drove here this morning. Nobody is awake in Lisbon except you. You came here. You are the heroes. It's amazing. So thank you for the introduction. And I would like to thank my mom for writing my introduction for me. Because many of you don't know very much about me, I'd just tell you 3 quick things. I run this organization, PopTech. We bring together scientists, technologists, engineers, designers, social innovators to work together on new approaches to some of the world's most difficult challenges. In addition, as was mentioned, I am an explorer at National Geographic in the US. I'm part of the program where they fit fat men into submarines and they send them to the bottom of the ocean. It's called Chubby Cousteau. And I just wrote this book on resilience, which you can buy upstairs. And go to poptech.org for free. Hundreds of amazing, inspiring, extraordinary presentations from some of the world's best and most thoughtful people working at the edge of what is known and what is possible. All for free, by the way. We are a nonprofit, like the foundation. We give all of our material away. Now, I have been here for about 10 days and spending enormous amounts of time doing research on Portugal. Enormous amounts of research. Huge, vast quantities bringing into my person. Vast amounts of research. I've been coming to Portugal for many years, but mostly for work, and this opportunity to be here with the foundation and to be here with all of you is extraordinary. And today, in the hour that we have to spend together or so, I want to talk about the future. I want to talk about the choices we have as a society. And one of the things I want to say to all of you is this effort from the foundation, coming at this moment in the society's history, with the choices in front of us that we have, could not be more important. Not just as a conference, but as the beginning of the opportunity for genuine action, deep reflection, and real change. And so it is an honor to be a guest in your home. I want to say it is an amazing thing to be invited into your conversation, just a little bit. And pastela de nata. I was 50 kilos smaller when I landed here. I have to check myself as baggage on the plane to go home. Ay, ay, ay. Okay. So, one message to carry with you as you think about everything I have to say to you this morning is this. Humanity and society, all of us here and all of us everywhere, are in a foot race between our challenges, the scope and speed and severity, the seriousness of the challenges that confront us as a society. Economic challenges being only one small component of a large nest of complex issues, which I'll talk about today. And our capacities, which are also accelerating at a rate that it is difficult for most of us to understand. What we are able to do now and what we understand that we are able to do, there is a lag. And in that lag is the reason for tremendous optimism. Now, this is a real race. No one is sure who will win. And the way we experience this is typically this way. A race that we live with every day in our families, in our communities, in our societies, and on our planet, a race between our hopes and our fears. And fear is justified now. Some fear is always justified. We have to live in reality. But there is real and genuine reason for optimism and for hope. And so I want to share with you lots of different connected insights around where the world may be going between now and 2030, and invite you into a conversation. Now, before I do this, given that we have been living through the most turbulent period in a long time, you should be very skeptical of any chubby futurist who stands before you and says, I know what's going to happen. Okay? You're in English, we would say, I hope this is not offensive, a bullshitometer. It's a special device, reads nonsense. You know? You should be set to kill for all of you. You should be ready to not tolerate any of this. So I want to begin my remarks this morning to all of you, talking with a note of humility about why it is so difficult to think about the future. Why is it so hard? And to start this conversation, I want to share with you two images of what people at the beginning of the 20th century thought life was going to look like now at the beginning of the 21st century. These are what they thought we were going to be living like. They thought we were going to be living on the left in giant electrical transformers and factories, and on the right that we were going to be rolling our whole town over to Grandma's house in one of the most schizophrenic relationships with the earth that you can imagine. So here's my question to you. Were the people who made these images of the future stupid? Were they dumb? No. They were the most informed people in society. So you all recognize this from your daily commute, I'm sure. Yeah? Every day you get up from your pod, you strap on your jetpack, you to the office, no problem, right? So my question is, why, when we think about the future, do we always seem to get it so wrong? All the time. And the answer is that we bring to the whole exercise of thinking about the future a piece of very faulty equipment, namely the one between here and here. Our brain was not designed to do complex adaptive systems analysis and multivariate analysis to come up with probabilistic outcomes about the future, taking into account the complex choices that people make and the disruptions of new technologies. No. And so one of the things we bring to the whole exercise of thinking about the future is a series of what are called cognitive biases. These are innate, subconscious errors that we make in judgment. And one of these errors is demonstrated here. It's called the novelty bias. When human beings think about the future, they take the newest fact, the thing that has just happened, and in the future they make it the dominant fact, the only thing that is happening. So if today is about green technologies, tomorrow is going to be about green utopia. If today we are sending satellites into space, tomorrow is about humans living in every planet in the cosmos. We overemphasize the present in the future. And I can give you a good example of this. In 1977, there were exactly 4 members of the International Brotherhood of Professional Elvis Impersonators. Now, it takes a certain courage to call yourself the international anything when you have 4 members and they all live in the same block of Las Vegas, Nevada. But with a lot of hard work, much effort, today there are 35,000 male and female. Yeah, give it up for the sisters, huh? You know who you are. Male and female members of the International Union of Professional Elvis Impersonators. And at this rate, by 2050, 1 in 3 people on Earth is going to be an Elvis impersonator. Our problems are solved. Now, we're going to have a little bit of audience participation in this next one I want to show you. Now, there is another bias that we bring to thinking about the future, and here's the exercise we're going to do. Can you lower the lights a little bit in the house? Just bring the light down a little bit so everyone can see the screen nice and bright. Okay, now here's the exercise we're going to do. I am going to show you all 2 pictures. They're going to flash on the screen. There is only one difference between the 2 pictures. You understand? When you see what is different about them, just when you notice, don't say anything, don't tap and okay? Just raise your hands, okay? You understand? Are you ready? Okay, here we go. Now, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, now stop. Now, can you bring the lights up so I can see everybody? Because this looks like God's flashlight shining in my face. Now, here's my question to you. Honestly, how many people here saw no difference between the 2 images? Okay? Look around. By the way, me too, first time. Now, I want you to watch again. Okay? But this time, I want you to pay attention to this part of the screen. The thing holding the plane in the sky disappears in front of your eyeballs, and nobody paid attention. Okay. This is because our brains are exquisitely, perfectly attenuated. They are designed to pay attention to other people. And can you bring the lights up a little bit so I can see everybody? Because it's, yeah, perfect, wonderful. Our brains overemphasize the actions of other people over abstract, slow-moving changes that happen in the background. And it has real consequences for humanity. So, for example, here are 2 risks we read about in the newspaper all the time, especially in my country. Over here, we have what we call the bad hair club for men. We don't like these guys, okay? The threat of terrorism. And over here, we have the disappearance of the largest glacier in Patagonia in 70 years. That is a picture from 1930 or so. This is a picture from the turn of the century. This is gone in one lifetime. Now, some very clever people did an analysis of your chances of being affected as an American, of the risk, the health risk of these 2 risks that everybody has heard about. Your chances of being affected by the threat of terrorism are about 1 in 28 million, much worse than winning the lottery most of the time. Your chances of being affected in your health by climate change in your life, and this is true for everyone in this room, about 1 in 6. And yet it's very hard to get people to do anything about it. Even our leaders can't agree to have another meeting about this problem. So here's the point I want to tell you. Why is it that it's so easy for us to galvanize responses to one and not to the other? Well, there are many reasons, but this one has a face. It breaks a moral taboo. It conforms to a story. It tells a story. There are bad guys, and there are therefore probably good guys, and they are in a conflict. It's a simple, simple narrative, and it unlocks enormous amounts of energy and money and resources. It's much harder to see the slower moving, more abstract, more structural changes. And those are the kinds of changes that led us into this situation that all of us find ourselves in today. Which kind of category, left or right, is the global financial crisis? Is it just about evil, a small cabal of evil people? There are some evil people, there's no question. But it's not just about them. It's a slower moving change. The demographic changes that we heard Carl talking about yesterday, those are like climate change. And we pay so much attention to the first category and not so much to the next one. And a very famous forecaster said very simply, in our societies, the fast-moving trends, the ones that go quickly, they get a lot of attention. But it's the slow-moving changes that have all the power. And it's hard because we don't pay attention to the slow-moving change. Okay, now, what does that mean? Well, today, for right now, we as a society have to think about resilience. How, if we have a very serious disruption in our economic system, in our social system, in our family system, because those systems are all connected, how will we be able to absorb the disruption, to deal with the disruption today? And how do we organize the systems so that if they are pushed over, they bounce back? That's today's agenda. But the long-term agenda is still about innovation. How do we create new forms of value in anticipation of what the future will need in a way that makes meaningful and systemic change to society? And so we have to balance how we reorganize in the short term so that we can think about creating new forms of value for the long term. Now, our organization has looked at nearly 1,000 cases of successful and unsuccessful innovation in many different categories. And I want to share with you some of our research. We looked at what is the culture of innovation in many of these places, and the places that are the most innovative in the world, the organizations that are the most innovative, the places that are the most innovative, and what do they do? Well, the first thing they do is they live in truth. They have good data. One of the most powerful things that the Foundation does, that I am most inspired by, is the way in which they circulate real data about society to the world. That is enormously important. But they balance truth and creative possibility. They are open to the possibility of real and fundamental change. And so the reason I say start with this one is that we have a problem in the period of disruption that we may be pessimistic. And the pessimism may be grounded in truth, but the pessimism may also close us to creative possibility, to the possibility that real difference is available. Now, they do some other things. They make the very top of the system accountable, politically, financially, organizationally. They constantly place lots of small bets. We always hear about the big things, but actually the organizations and the societies that are the most innovative are constantly doing little things. They're trying small experiments all the time. They're investing in those who are closest to the citizens and the stakeholders, not the people at the top, but the people who are at the base of the pyramid. They use many innovations from outside. They listen to the outside, but they copy exactly the outside only rarely, because another organization's history and values and context give it its best practices. We need to find our own. But there's a few things that these organizations do that are enormously important. One is that they network furiously. One of the most important things that will happen at this event is not what you will ever hear on the stage from me or anybody who stands up to talk to you. It's the relationships we make with each other. Because without those relationships, we can't act together. These organizations embrace what we call cognitive diversity. Now, what we mean by this is that they have people who think about the same problem, but one thinks as an artist, one thinks as a mathematician, one thinks as a physicist, one thinks as a manager. Their style of thinking is different, but they're thinking about the same problem with the same values. They have a facility for scanning for what we call weak signals, things that are on the edge today that are not disruptive but might be tomorrow. And this is the most important thing. They think both for the short term and the long term. They think in more than one time frame at the same time. This is the only list in the whole. I wanted you to see one list. This is it. Okay. So now I want to talk a little bit about the global context. Nobody can come to your home and tell you how to fix it. It's something that needs to be done by the people who live in the home. But we can provide a little bit of perspective on what's happening around the world. And what you heard from Carl a little bit yesterday, I want to reemphasize. And that is that we are living in a time, at the human scale, the whole planetary scale, a time of spikes in which population is exploding. Somewhere around the middle of the last century, we figured out it was a pretty good idea to wash your hands, and all of a sudden humanity got much healthier. And then we invented all kinds of new healthcare technologies, and now we're living through not an S curve, not a J, but like this. But this is not the only thing that's happening. Our conversation cannot only be about demographics, because this curve is also driving this curve. There's enormous wealth being made in the world. This is the kind of global domestic product of planet Earth. It's also accelerating. And the amount of carbon that we put into the atmosphere is also exploding. And the number of species that we are losing from the library of living things is also accelerating, all at the same time. This is a terrifying set of spikes, and they're just a few of what is an enormous library. We could have spent our whole hour showing you things like this. The number of McDonald's restaurants on Earth. I'm very sorry. I just want to say, and so is my waistline. And these accelerating curves, they have a consequence. A researcher named Johan Rockström at the Stockholm Resilience Center and his colleagues identified 9 variables on planet Earth that make the life support for humanity possible. They actually make it possible for us to live here at all. Of those 9 variables, they include things like climate change and the acidification of the ocean and how much fresh water there is available, and how much chemical pollution there is. Of those 9 variables, 3 have been exceeded in terms of the planet's ability to maintain the biosphere on which we depend for life right now. And another couple are in danger of being exceeded right now. Now, this is a very, very challenging fact that we have to accept. It is a byproduct of where we are and who we are. And it has real consequences on planet Earth. When we connect all of those systems to each other, we get very strange things happening. This is a story I want to share with you from Mexico City. In 2010, in Mexico City, 2007, there were riots in Mexico City. Riots. And the rioters who came together, who flooded, it's 2010. The rioters who flooded into Mexico City, they did not bring guns. They brought ears of corn that they held above their heads. This is a protester holding up an ear of corn. These were called the tortilla riots. And people were protesting the fact that the price of corn had gone up 400% in 3 months. And people were worried about starving. Now, the protesters blamed all the usual suspects, the people you might expect, big government, and they blamed the politicians, and they blamed the wealthy ranch holders, but they could not have suspected what was the immediate trigger, and that was this. Several years before, Hurricane Katrina hit the Gulf Coast of the United States, and America shut down all of its oil refineries. And the price of gasoline skyrocketed. In some cases, it doubled overnight. And this made the price of corn, which is used to make a fuel called ethanol, look very cheap by comparison. And so there was a huge effort to divert the human corn crop, the crop we eat, into the kinds of fuels that we use for making fuel. And in an era of global trade, that linked the price of oil to the price of corn. So they started to move in lockstep. And then there was a speculation bubble in the global financial markets in oil. And that changed immediately the price of corn. So here are the prices of these 2 commodities. The thing I want you to pay attention, don't try to read it, just pay attention to this end of the curve. All of a sudden, these 2 curves are not correlated, and then they become very correlated. They come together. And what you get as a result of this is a food riot. But it's not just a regular food riot, it's a story that ties together the climate system and the energy system and the food security system and demography and global finance and trade and politics and poverty. Everything is connected in these kinds of stories. And nobody who saw the hurricane hit Louisiana thought to themselves, a few years from now, there will be food riots in another country that was not affected as a result of the intersection between the climate, weather, and our energy system. So this is kind of volatility is here to stay. And we are experiencing this more locally. You know, I found this totally fascinating, right? When you start to see people putting up ads for alcohol aimed at foreign leaders, you know that the systems are connected in ways that are very strange to an outsider, to an observer, to a guest. But I think there is a deeper question in front of us. And it's not just, I think what you should do is send her to Comporta. I went to Comporta. Oh my goodness, 1 week, we will fix this. She just needs a suntan. That's it. Okay. I think, though, we are worried, and rightly so, understandably so, about deeper questions. For me, those questions are about how we connect across generations, in families. What is our relationship to one another? Not what is our demography. Can we achieve a perfect balance, the right kind of scale? These are critical questions, but they're really the background to the most important questions, which is how will we relate to each other as generations? How do we connect? How will we take care of our older folks? How will they take care of us? What does this mean for our families? For the natural human desire to pass along wisdom, the accumulated wisdom that all of us take like a small flame through life. So these are the questions I want us to talk about. And this is the most important thing I want to share you. The most important story today is the next one I want to tell you. Over the course of the last 10 days, I have been engaging, this is not scientific, okay? This is not science. Giant sign, not science, not scientific, okay? Proceed with caution. He may be lying to you right now. So, I have been talking with people in Portugal, everybody I can find, people in the taxi, and in the people in stores, and people on the streets. I come up like a crazy person. Hi, there's some random guy talking in English. Hi, can I talk to you? I want to talk to you. And I asked them a question, and we had lunch yesterday. I asked this question at the table. On a scale from 0, which is comporta, to 10, which is, I'm totally, in English we'd say, freaked out, really, really worried, hyper anxious about the future. Where do you think, I ask people, I've asked 200 people in the last 10 days, where do you think Portuguese society is right now? Okay? So I want to ask you. Now I have the chance to ask a lot more than 200 people. Okay, fix a number in your head. Okay? This is not where you are. This is where do you think society as a whole is? And this is what I can tell you. The average answer, this is the mean. It's a mean average, mean and fairly consistent across the data set. Just talking to me, a crazy stranger, people said 8. How many people here thought 8? How many people here thought higher than 8? How many people here thought lower than 8? Okay, this is what's fascinating. Then I asked people, okay, where are you? Not where is society, but where are you? And what's interesting is I got 2 answers very consistently. Now, there's always outliers. You may not agree with this particular thing. This is just not science, okay? When I ask people, and they look like they're in their 20s, I get about 7. When I ask people who are in their 50s and higher, I get about 5. This is fascinating to me. This is a subject of real need in society. We need to understand how we are doing, and how we think we are thinking is different than how we are thinking. People would say, society is freaked out, but I am a little less freaked out. I am a little less worried. The people who are younger seemed more concerned than the people who are older. When I asked them why, they said things like, you know, I've lived a long life. I have a good family. I have my health. I have pastel de nata and comporta. I'm Portuguese. I'm going to be fine. I've been through a long period. And the younger people were saying, I don't know if I need to leave or to stay. I don't know if my opportunities will be here, and I want them to be here. And interestingly, the only deviation I got is when I asked people who were in their 50s, how worried are you about your children? Where do you think they're at? Yeah. This is the conversation. This is maybe the only conversation that matters. This is a conversation about fear and optimism. And the way we feel and what we signal to one another as a society shapes how everybody else thinks. Our emotions are like a virus. They spread like a contagion. And they shape our overall understanding of how we live in truth and creative possibility. Now, I want to keep this in mind because I want to share with you this story. For the last several years, I've been very involved in the country of Iceland. For those of you who've never been there, it looks like this. Not comporta, the opposite. Okay? It's a country of about 300,000 people in the middle of the North Atlantic. Iceland got into financial trouble for very ordinary reasons. They let their banks go bananas. They just said, okay. And the currency inflated 12,000%. 12,000%. 1 euro was worth 120 euros. The first time I was invited to speak in the middle of the craziness, they said, okay, we'd like you to come to Iceland. And I said, okay, I'm going to make an appointment. They said, no, we'll send a plane for you. A 747 for me. I'm not Madonna, okay? The mic, I'm not a superstar. I did not understand how they could do such a thing. Their stock market index went to 9,000 from a few hundred. Huge inflation. The banks got way out of control, and we all know how that story ended. It ended like this. Notice the similarity in logo between the two banks there, yeah. The stock market went from 9,000 to 14 with no zeros on the end of it, just 14. And people were terrified. This was the largest financial collapse in history on a per capita basis. A friend of mine who is in Iceland took this photo because it was the moment when the prime minister at the time went on television and told Icelandic society underneath in English, don't worry. And he said, this is the moment we all knew civilization was over. Because everybody knew he was lying. He wasn't exaggerating. He was lying to us. You can't live in truth if your leaders won't tell you the truth. But it was not entirely his fault. He was under enormous pressure to follow what we call the American model of financial bailouts. This is a long-tested American liberal theory of economics. And can you imagine getting calls from the Secretary of Treasury of the United States and the IMF and the World Bank? Oh, you have to take over this debt. And then something amazing happened. So they came up with a package in which the society was going to absorb all of this enormous thing. It was going to destroy them as a society for generations to come. And this is what people thought. They thought Iceland will just sink to the bottom of the ocean. Explorers in the future will find it. This is over. And then something amazing happened. This man, he is the president. His name is Oliver Grimson. He was in a largely ceremonial role. He didn't have a lot of responsibilities as the president, but one of them was to certify the passing of new laws. They passed the financial bailouts, and Grimson refused to sign the papers. He said, this decision belongs with the people. And twice, Iceland voted all together not to bail out the banks. Twice. By wide margins. And of course, everybody got very worried. This was an act of tremendous courage from someone who had been there for the long term, who changed his role in the middle of the crisis. But even more interestingly is this fact. This was not the only leadership happening in the society. A group of ordinary citizens, people not like the wonderful, we're all wonderful people in this room, but students, young people, and old people from every walk of life came together and started something called the National Assembly. 1,500 people from across Iceland, which about the same size as the people attending this room, but this is from a much smaller country. You could invite everyone who lives in Iceland to sleep on your sofa just in Lisbon and still have sofas left over. Okay, this is a small place. And these folks began to vote. What were the values that mattered the most? That was their first question. The answer was integrity. It's the most important Icelandic value. This group of ordinary citizens produced a set of guiding principles that should guide the future of society. They didn't have laws. They didn't want to write a constitution. They just wanted to get together and begin to think about how to remake, in gentle ways, that were respectful, where appropriate, of authority. This was not revolution. This was about reinvention. One of the political parties took up this cause that was started by ordinary citizens and said, we're going to pass a law, which they did, which created an opportunity for ordinary citizens to run and to be elected to a group of 25 citizens. This is the group of 25. They were not parliament. They were not lawyers. They came from every walk of life. Some of them were scholars, but others were business leaders and ordinary citizens. There was, very importantly, someone with a disability who was involved in the process. And this group of people began a very intensive 3 or 4 month process to basically take what had happened in society and what the national self-organized amateur groups had done and build a new constitution from scratch. This was a process that had a Facebook page. They received 3,000 comments on their work as they were doing their work, moving toward a new constitution. People were using social media to comment on what they were doing within Iceland. This resulted last year, just at the tail end of last year, in a new constitution being finished. And this October 20th, the whole society is going to vote in a referendum on an entirely new set of fundamental principles for the organization of the society. That's amazing. That didn't come just from the top. It was the opportunity, the space was created at the top for people to emerge from below. Now, you say, what an inspiring story. And it is an inspiring story, but it's not the only thing that has led to Iceland's resilience. One of the other things that's really important is the fact that Iceland has the benefit of having an almost entirely clean energy economy. They generate almost 100% of their electricity from geothermal energy. They have almost no petrol in the society except that they import to drive cars around. And as soon as they can figure out how to get electric vehicles to work at very low temperatures where they live, they'll get rid of those petrol-driving cars as well. So the connection between being able to survive a financial crisis and having a differentiated energy platform is connected. They also have an incredible music scene and creative culture. This is, I come, the nearest big town where I live is Worcester, Massachusetts, which is like the armpit of America. It's not the best place in the world. It's about 180,000 people. Reykjavik is about 120,000 people. Reykjavik has given us Sigur Rós and Björk and the Sugar Cubes and on and on and on and on and on. And that incredible creative culture does three things for Iceland. The first one is that it creates a culture in which people can be very entrepreneurial. They have a skill base they can take with them. The second is that it gives them the opportunity to cooperate with each other. Musicians are always reforming their bands. You know, three of them get together, form a band. One of them goes off with two other people, they form a band. And that fabric of relationships, that network of relationships and opportunities for collaboration create a social fabric in which people know how to work with each other. And the third thing that this music scene does is it brings along the rest of the creative economy. It creates the opportunities for designers and artists and graphic people to produce all kinds of other material, and each brings the other to a new place. In fact, now there is a thriving internet startup culture in Iceland. This is a company called Green Cloud, just one of lots of examples. They are building cloud computing data servers that are heated by geothermal energy, powered by geothermal energy from below, and cooled by the fact that they are in Iceland. No air conditioning, which means no carbon emissions. So this is a completely different way of thinking about the internet. Now they also very carefully manage their natural resources, and so they have natural resources, they have a creative economy, they have an engaged citizenry, and they have a huge tourism industry. Basically, wherever that pretty woman goes, those four guys in the background will follow. Basically, she could go anywhere in the world, and they've convinced her to come to Iceland. So lots of guys are following. And so you say, what a beautiful place. What a wonderful place to visit. Inexpensive, duty-free, blah, blah, blah. But there is another fact that makes Iceland resilient in this situation. And that is that while this is the picture that we sell to the world, this is the picture that Icelanders remember. All of Iceland is just a generation or two from destitution, poverty, extraordinary hardship. Iceland is a very difficult place to live if you don't have electricity. Electricity was unknown in Iceland until, for many people, until the 1960s, 1970s. Iceland's journey is very much in some ways like Portugal's journey. If you think about the fact that this was a country in which half the population was illiterate in the 1970s, the mid-1970s. Look at the transition that has happened here. And the memory, this is the important thing, the memory of failure, the fact that in the culture is a sense that things can go wrong, keeps the society, does two things. The memory of failure, the cultural memory of the possibility of failure, does two things. First, it makes most people live a little bit more modestly, a little more carefully, a little more respectfully. But the other thing is that when things go wrong, people know that we've been here before and we've survived. And so it is a break on pessimism. The fact that we remember that things go wrong in the past, ironically, helps us better deal with things when they go wrong in the present. They actually make us less pessimistic in the present. This form of cultural memory is found around the world. Some of you will remember this last year when a huge tsunami hit Tokyo, hit Japan. You all remember this terrible event. This was a tsunami that had not been seen, something of this scale had not been seen in centuries in Japan. But interestingly, in Japan, about 1,000 years ago, a tsunami just like this was seen. And people who lived in a small village called Murahama on an island raced in advance of the waves 1,000 years ago up to the top of a hill. And just as they came to the top of the hill, another wave came behind them through the mountain pass that connected them to the island, to the mainland, and obliterated everyone at this point that looked safe but wasn't. And so the people who lived there erected this, a shrine, a religious shrine that continues to this day. And in the terrible earthquake and tsunami and disaster that befell Japan last year, lives were saved because of a message that was sent through this shrine, through the presence of this shrine, 1,000 years ago in the past. Generations 1,000 years ago spoke to their later generations in the present. And so we find in places that are resilient all over the world, in places like where I live in New Orleans, just a good example in the US, there is a deep culture of the memory of failure. We have to keep this alive. It's the beginning of wisdom. So, because of all of these factors, Iceland came out of its moment of crisis. But interestingly, what the sign says is, we got a new constitution, we got a new government, we dumped the debt slavery to the banks. Now, this is not the end. This is the beginning. Now we have to prepare for a new future. Getting through the crisis is not preparing for the future. Keeping the patient alive is not living your life after you've had surgery or had a terrible accident. So I want to leave you with a few thoughts about the future. And you have to remember that many times what we say about the future is wrong, and you should distrust everything. We should think about it together for ourselves, not just listen to what we're told. But there are some themes emerging in the present that seem suggestive, and I want to share those with you. Because I believe, Bill Clinton once said about America that there was nothing wrong with America that couldn't be fixed by what was right with America. And I think the same thing is true here. But we have to understand where new forms of value will be created. I believe very strongly that in the 21st century, we will see the creation of new forms of value in several ways. People who are able to control and deeply understand how to create with precision and creativity bits, digital bits. If you understand how to make digital bits with precision and creativity, if you deeply understand the digital world, there lies the way of wealth. But also molecules. And the difference between bits and molecules is disappearing as we learn to engineer molecules using bits and vice versa. But the first is what underwrites the success. The bits underwrite the success of information technology and finance. The molecules underwrite the success of health, our understanding of chemistry and biology. The third is in energy, understanding essentially electrons and photons and how to move things around the world. And the fourth is in ideas. The ability to create bits, molecules, energy, and ideas with precision and creativity defines the successors. It's part, if you think about what happened in Iceland, all of those elements are present in the Icelandic story. And so one of the things I want to say to you is innovation is not just about process. It's not just about an outcome, coming up with something new. It's also about culture. and creating a culture in which these elements can thrive. As we have to think about the very difficult choices financially facing Europe and Portugal, and most importantly, the Portuguese in this context, I believe very firmly that the amount of creativity in this society, the amount of opportunity in this society is so great that if we can get everybody innovating, we can more than deal with the financial crisis. We can create enormous wealth and forward progress. So I want to share with you about how some of this innovation is happening in other parts of the world. And this is where I will close. This is Hayat Sindhi. She's a PhD biochemist from Saudi Arabia. She's the highest achieving woman of her generation in Saudi Arabia in the sciences. And what she's holding in her hand is a 1-cent stamp that you lick. And if the stamp turns green, you have HIV. And if it turns yellow, you have malaria. And if it turns blue, you have hepatitis. It's a paper-based health diagnostic designed for the 1.6 billion people who don't have access, regular access to clinical care because it's too expensive. It's a huge innovation for the future. This is a woman named Rose Goslinga up in the corner. And what she has developed in Kenya is something called Kilimo Salama. It's an insurance program. It's in finance. It's what we call micro-insurance. Most people, farmers in Kenya, grow on very small plots of land, much smaller than the size of this room. And so these folks are subsistence farmers. They're not growing very big plots of land. They're mostly growing their own food. They save a little bit, sell it at market, and that is their savings. Their labor costs are very low, but their vulnerability to climate change is very high. And so this is a system that allows them to purchase on their mobile phones insurance for their crops. The woman at the top just bought for her 3 or 4 kilos of seed stock. She bought crop insurance. And everywhere there is a wireless sensor that provides the cell phone connectivity, there is also a weather sensor. And the moment there is too much rain or too little rain, she gets a payout on her mobile phone. It's an amazing innovation that helps us deal with the disruptions of climate change. Oops, sorry. This is Ushahidi, a platform designed by a group of Kenyan engineers, staying with Kenya for a moment, that is designed to allow ordinary citizens to report a problem when there's a crisis. So, for example, it was used in Port-au-Prince, Haiti, in the wake of the earthquake in Haiti. Citizens trapped in buildings could text with their mobile phone, I am at this location, there are 3 people here, we need help. That information was routed from their mobile phones to members of the Haitian diaspora around the world who translated from Creole, the language of Haiti, into English so that the first responders who were coming from the United States could see where everybody was and respond in English and have the text translated back into Creole and sent back to the people in the buildings in under 2 minutes. And thousands of lives were saved because of a platform that was built by ordinary citizens. This is Daniel Nocera. Daniel is a biochemist. He's a very famous chemist at MIT. And what he's doing is working on artificial photosynthesis, what we call biomimetic technologies, technologies that copy nature. A plant is able to turn sunlight into stored energy. It's able to do that through some very sophisticated chemistry, which we only partly understand today. And he is building tools that allow us to capture sunlight and store it when it's dark, not in batteries, but in new chemical bonds that could transform the way we think about energy. This is from my own country, from New Orleans. As some of you will remember, when we had a very big flood in the wake of Katrina, people were trapped in their attics. They ran into their attics to avoid drowning and then got trapped there and drowned in their attics. So now as New Orleans begins to rebuild, they're building homes like this one. When waters rise, if there's a flood, this home also rises. It's built on floaters underneath, and the whole home just floats away with the people inside. It becomes a houseboat. I want one. I want one anyway. I think it's amazing. And here are people, these in Europe, but others in America and other places, beginning to fundamentally rethink the structure of the urban environment. They are citizen urban designers who are engaged in acts of what we call depaving. They're literally taking the pavements out of the ground because they act as heat sinks and create terrible climate problems for cities, and rethinking how to introduce the natural environment into cities. These are real jobs. Every one of the things I just showed you, people are being paid to do. They're being paid to deal with the disruptive challenges of the century in front of us. Now, it's not just mindfulness that we have to teach, but when we think about the resilience of the next generation, the generation we are so concerned about, it's actually lots of things. If this young, beautiful Portuguese girl is going to fulfill all of her resilient potential, we have to focus on the health of her social networks and the quality of her closest intimate relationships, her closest confidants. And we have to ensure her access to resources. Her resilience resides in her health and in the interaction of her genes and her life experiences. They reside in her beliefs about herself, her optimism about the future, and her habits of mind all together. So we see the outlines of a new agenda, an agenda that doesn't just push us forward into new forms of value, making new kinds of money, making new kinds of products for new kinds of people, addressing the problems that are in front of us, but also the beginnings of a new inward journey, which is about understanding the psychological and social dimensions of what makes us resilient. It's just the beginning of the journey. And so what I can say to you, we are here at Presente no Futuro, and I would like to say to you this. In this challenge, this foot race between our challenges and our capacity, between our hopes and our fears for the future, in this environment, if we want the green side to win in this foot race, we have to start taking the future seriously now. Our future, right, commences now. And with that, I will say, obrigado. Thank you. Yeah, don't put me up there. No man should be forced to see his own derriere on a large screen. It's not good for the ego. Or maybe it's very good for the ego. Might be good for the humility. Okay, we have time for a few questions, I think. Or do we?
So, muito obrigado, André Zolli. Temos tempo para umas perguntas.
I'll put the earphones on.
Eu vou fazer um prognóstico, vai haver muitas boas perguntas. Está nas vossas mãos.
Thank you for your conference and for your thoughts. Huh? I'm here. Fala em português ou inglês?
Português, talvez.
Português?
Sim.
I'm here, on your right hand.
Okay. Yes.
It was very... É em português, não é? de reinvenção. O exemplo da da Islândia, é muito importante para nós, até porque temos a memória difícil da pobreza dos 40 a 50 anos, temos várias coisas parecidas com a Islândia, não temos, e isso é uma coisa que eu lhe pergunto, se não nas suas variáveis, nas variáveis que indicou para a Islândia, que é um exemplo de democracia e de ação cívica, se a educação não foi importante, educação e cultura. Quando eu digo cultura, quero dizer quando a cultura serve para que a instrução se transforme em verdadeira educação. E, portanto, a questão da educação e a questão do sistema de justiça, que foi uma coisa de que não falou, mas que eu creio que é extremamente importante para criar confiança, porque aí sim a justiça funcionou e isso criou confiança nas instituições, que é um problema muito grave que nós temos em Portugal.
Okay.
Okay, this is weird. So I just want to speak to your point. Iceland, the question was about the nature of the justice. Let me take the justice system and then the education system. In the justice system, you're right. The choice that Iceland took to criminally indict their bankers and their former prime minister to find out what happened and what went wrong is an important part of both holding the top accountable and also, just as important, it's about getting to the truth. It's not just about punishment, but it's about the truth. I will tell you a story, a related story. This one is about from the world of science. There's a wonderful, we call him comparative primatologist. He studies apes and chimpanzees, monkeys, to see what is common between them. His name is Frans de Waal. And he trained a group of monkeys to do a simple task in exchange for a cucumber. So the monkey would do the task, get the cucumber. Do the task, get the cucumber. The monkey became pretty good at doing the task, gets the cucumber. Kind of boring. So now they come up with another situation. They put the monkey in a cage with a glass box. And on the other side of the glass is another monkey. And they had to train the monkeys to work together so that both monkeys do the task, they both get a cucumber. Only if the two monkeys do the same task together do they get a cucumber. You understand? So far, so good? Okay. So the monkeys get very good at this. You know, they're like disco dancers. Boop, boop. You know, they're touching and they're spinning around and they're watching each other. Very good, almost like dancing together to get the cucumber. And then the researchers, they introduce a very subtle change. The change is that every once in a while, when the two monkeys do the task, one gets a cucumber and the other one gets a grape. Now, monkeys love grapes. They're like the pastel de nata of monkeys, okay? They love these grapes because they're sweet. So the two monkeys do a task. One gets a cucumber, the other one gets a grape. Now, rationally, it should make no difference because they both get a reward. It's just that one reward is a lot better than the other reward, right? You know, one is like, you both do this job and, you know, you get a Toyota and you get a BMW. But you're both getting a car. But what happens almost immediately is that the monkey that gets the cucumber goes on strike. He goes, no way, this asshole with the grape, no, I'm not working with him. No, they don't say anything like this, okay? Immediately, because primates, all of us are primates. We have what we think of as an inequality aversion. We are actually averse to having disproportionate outcomes, and we expect justice. And when we don't get it, we stop. Now, in the United States, we decided not to have any justice. No one's gone to jail for our financial crisis. And it is a huge problem. Some economists estimate it is costing us a point or two of GDP growth because people don't believe the system is fair. So fairness and truth and justice matter. I can't speak to Portuguese institutions. I'm a guest in your home. It's for you to decide what the changes need to happen. But I can say to you that without this form of fairness, without justice, there can be no growth. Now, in terms of education, I am no expert in the Portuguese education system, but I do know a bit about the Icelandic education system, which is good. It's a good system, but it's by no means world-class. And the generation of people that were raised, who were in charge, and many of the people who were making decisions about change did not come from some terrific educational system. There was an argument when we invented contemporary democracy. Did it require an education to be a citizen? And what we have found over and over again is that education helps enormously, but it's not a requirement. People know, if they're helped, how to make the right decisions. That doesn't mean we don't educate them. We need to do that for sure, but it's not the first worry. The more serious concern is about the health of institutions and the transparency of institutions.
Muito bem. Mais 2 ou 3 perguntas rápidas, por favor.
Bom dia. Em Portugal tem-se utilizado muito o exemplo da Islândia. Mas eu pergunto-me, numa sociedade com 300 mil habitantes, devem-se conhecer quase todos, não é? Portanto, as relações políticas são simplicíssimas. Não é num país com 10 milhões, ou com 15, ou com 20, ou com 30, parece-me que é completamente irrealista usar esse... Por outro lado, a responsabilizar alguém, nós teríamos que responsabilizar quem nos meteu num colete de força chamado euro. Porque é evidente que tudo o que se fez na Islândia em termos de recuperação, que neste momento está a subir já o seu crescimento, teve a ver com medidas que seriam totalmente impossíveis num país metido numa moeda como o euro, enfim, em que uma economia fraca tem que usar uma moeda de um país fortíssimo como a Alemanha. Portanto, a questão da Islândia é uma coisa teórica, muito engraçada, mas que me parece que não tem grande aplicação nestes casos. Obrigado.
Okay, so I understand the question, and I appreciate the candor and passion of your perspective. I want to say first that the message from Iceland is not that Iceland's response is everyone's response. Iceland's response cannot be Portugal's response. The truth of the matter is that Iceland's response is Iceland's response, and what the story explains, I think the best, is that Iceland's response should not have been America's response. It wasn't necessarily the IMF or the World Bank's response. They didn't want Iceland to go in the direction that they did. They were under enormous pressure to do what we tell you. And now they hold up Iceland as a model for recovery. Now, the reason that I say this is that I think that Iceland found their own authentic voice and their own path. Now, I'm not an economist. I have my own views, but they're amateur views about the relationship, about whether or not the Eurozone and the European project, which was a political project, it's struggling to become an effective economic project. I come from a country in which we have states many of which are about the same size as nations here. Some of those states receive more from the Treasury, and some pay in more to the Treasury. And the history is complicated. We had to fail several times on the way to figuring it out, to finding what worked for us in the 18th century and the 19th century. And the path is never smooth. So no matter what the answer is, it will be bumpy. And I think that's all I can say. I'm not sure I can have the argument with you about which path.
Mais uma pergunta, não temos tempo para mais. Mais uma, se faz favor.
Bom dia. Bom dia. I don't know if you get it. Bom dia. Nós ontem ouvimos aqui de manhã que a população mundial passou rapidamente de 1,6 bilhões para 6,1 bilhões.
1.000 milhões em português.
1.000 milhões, peço desculpa. 1.000 milhões. Isto tem 100 anos. Eu vivia na cidade do México em 2007, quando começaram a existir revoltas pelo aumento do preço do milho. Não na altura pelo Katrina, mas porque era considerado útil começar a armazenar milho como matéria-prima para energias alternativas e menos poluentes, mas que começou a aumentar o preço de quem precisava de comida. E, portanto, a minha primeira pergunta é se nós, apesar de discutirmos muito a crise, o euro e déficits, não damos com uma agenda cujas prioridades estão erradas face a assuntos que podem, no curto prazo, ser muito mais importantes para todos. E a minha segunda questão era para o Andrew, naquela escala de 1 com porta e 10 freak out, em que escala é que o Andrew está?
Boa pergunta.
You got it right?
I didn't know.
I can translate.
Okay.
2 questions. First, about global problems and local European, Portuguese and European problems.
Okay.
Maybe they are different, or your opinion on that. So, number of the population, all that in the world. Second question, what is your answer to the questionnaire from 0 to 10? What's your...
what's my answer?
Yes.
Your answer, your personal answer.
Okay. So, first, the question was about the difference between the world and the local situation. Yeah, the data is the data. The trends are the trends. Here is the demographic forecast in 3 sentences. The future is more of us, many more than we can handle, many more poor people. The future is older and younger, because we see this split. It's browner and more female. It's more globally southern, it's more urban. Okay, now, is that world that we are going to live in the optimum? I don't think so. One of the lessons that I take from Iceland, it goes back to this question before, is that you don't have to be big to have an impact. In our society, we had a very famous anthropologist said, never doubt that a small group of people can change the world, because in fact, small groups of people are the only kinds of people who change the world. Okay? So I think we have to separate out this idea. I mean, people say China is a big superpower. The next big superpower. India is a big superpower. We see everybody's a celebration of scale. Big, 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 big. I think the future is about finding the right size, not the biggest size. You know, Americans, we eat a lot. Everything about America is big. I'm big, 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 big. Do any of you want to be me? No. No, none of you want to be me. Okay? You don't want that model. So I think it's finding a smaller scale that is about creating happiness. And in a small nation of Bhutan, when they went through the process of writing a new constitution, they put not the gross national product, but gross national happiness as the central measure of society. What would our societies look like if we said we're going to maximize the satisfaction of living for every society? We decouple the discussion from size. So, you know, the systems have gotten too big. I think it's time to bring them down as best we can in the midst and deal with the impacts of the places where we cannot. Now,
and your number.
then I'm going to give you the number, and then I'm done, okay? My number for you is, I think my concern about where things are at generally in the near term is about a 6. It's real. These are real problems we're going to have to deal with. My view for the future is if we make the right choices, we can be all on the beach in Comporta, okay? If we do it together, but only together. So thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
It's been an honor.
Muito obrigado. Muito obrigado.